Hola clase, vamos a repasar los verbos reflexivos hoy. Si recuerdan, con los verbos reflexivos, the subject of the verb both performs and receives the action. Reflexive verbs always use the reflexive pronoun. So the person doing the action also receives the action. If you think of reflexive verbs, they have the say. Usually used with daily routine. If you think of Spanish too, you think of all the daily routine vocabulary that you had. They all, if you know something's reflexive, if the infinitive has a say in it. Can you think of other daily routine verbs? Peinarse, despertarse, levantarse, bañarse, etc. All having to do with the daily routines. If you think about it, for example, ducharse, me ducho. Me ducho, I shower myself. You're receiving the action and you're also doing the action. Many verbs that are expressed reflexively in Spanish are not expressed reflexively in English. We are going to mostly be reviewing reflexive verbs that you're unfamiliar with. Make sure that you have the vocab sheet that has los reflexivos. It says Lección 2, páginas 62 y 63. There's two sides to it. You had the verbos como gustar on one side, and then you have the reflexives on the other. Before doing this video, make sure that you fill out that sheet from English to Spanish. So you may have to stop this, fill out that sheet, and then come back, because you're going to need to use that. Olvidarse is to forget, which is on your sheet. On your sheet, first you have the daily routine. Then you have the verbs that change meaning when you use the reflexive pronoun. And the other, you have otros reflexivos, which olvidarse is at the bottom of that. It's to forget. So, primero vamos a repasar los pronombres. Tenemos mete, se, nos, o, se. If you have a reflexive verb and the person is receiving and performing the action, then you would use the mete, se, nos, o, se. So, me olvido, for example, te olvidas, se olvida, nos olvidamos, os olvidáis, y se olvidan. So, I forget, you forget, he, she, you forget, we forget, you all forget, and they forget. Now, remember, always agree with the person doing the action. So most of the time, the reflexive verbs, when you're using them reflexively, you have the pronoun is agreeing with the person. So the me goes with the yo form, and the te goes with the to form. I will show you some instances with the daily routine where sometimes it's not the case. But in most situations, it is, especially with the ones that are not daily routine. Pronoun placement, los pronombres. Before the conjugated verb, antes del verbo conjugado. You can always do it right here, except for positive commands. Attached to the infinitive, voy a acercarme, me voy a acercar. Acercarse is to approach. Or you can attach to the present participle, the ando or the yendo. If you attach it, make sure you put the accent mark over the A or the E. It can always go before the conjugated verb. The only time that it cannot go before a conjugated verb is when it's a positive command, which we will get to third quarter. If the action is not performed and received by the same person, then it's not reflexive. You need to worry about this with the daily routine, not as much the other ones. Yo te despierto cada mañana. I wake you up every morning. So I am doing the action of waking you up. So it's not used reflexively. Felipe se despierta cada mañana, and I have a typo there. There should be an S right there. Lo siento. Felipe wakes up every morning. He wakes himself up. So the se agrees with the verb. That's how we're usually going to use it, but just so you know, you can use it the other way. El despertador me despierta. The alarm clock wakes me up. The subject is the alarm clock wakes me up. Okay, so that's another way that you can use it. But like I said, typically with the other reflexives that we're going to be using, it's just going to be used reflexively. The verbs are. Now, many verbs also change meaning when used reflexively. So, pueden ir a la página 63 para algunos ejemplos, which would be a good idea, page 63 in your book. These verbs are also on your reflexive vocabulary sheet. They're on the first side of the middle of the page, which says, los verbos que cambian sentido cuando usan el pronombre reflexivo. Without a reflexive verb, it means something different than with a reflexive verb. There are also some verbs that, depending on how you use them, can be used with verbs like gustar, or they can be used reflexively. A ella le aburre la clase de arte. That means art class bores her. If you look on your verbs like gustar, you have aburre there. You can also use this and say, ella se aburre en la clase de arte. She is bored in art class. It's the same thing. It depends on how you want to use it. In this situation, in the first one, la clase de arte is the subject, which goes with aburre, and then le is the indirect object. In the second one, ella is the subject, and it's used reflexively. Me preocupa el examen. So basically, the exam or the test worries me. Preocuparse, if you also look on the bottom of the first page, is used reflexively. And you could say, yo me preocupo por el examen. You don't have to have the yo. I am worried about the exam. A lot of these reflexive verbs have por or para with it, which have prepositions. So make sure you memorize the prepositions with them, because the English is I am worried about, but in Spanish it's por. So you don't want to get that wrong on a test. Especially with these, you need to memorize the prepositions with them. Otro te sorprende el campeonato. So basically, the championship surprises you. Sorprenderse is also reflexive, so you can say te sorprendes el campeonato. You are surprised by the championship. Basically, the only difference between these, who is the subject? The subject here is el campeonato. The subject here is you. Okay? Completely up to you how you want to do it. La última cosa, the last thing, which we're going to touch on a little bit, is another use of the word say. Say is used reciprocally. When you want to express an action that is done to another or yourself, all you have to do is add the reflexive pronoun. You can add it to any verb as long as it makes sense. For example, they speak. If you want to say they speak to each other, all you have to do is add the say. Okay? For example, if you want to say he speaks, él habla. If you want to say he speaks to himself, you could say él se habla. We love. Nosotros amamos. Okay, that's to love a person. If you want to say we love each other, nos amamos, for example. So a lot of the verbs you can make reflexive. You can also say, if you want to say, él se ama, he loves himself, he's full of himself, right? If you want to emphasize something, this is important. You want to say one another. This is how you would say it, and I know you guys have been trying to say it in your compositions. So, el uno al otro. This is two guys. If you're talking about a guy, girls, la una a la otra. If there's a combination of the both, you would say el uno a la otra, depending. Okay, so it's one another. Vamos a practicarlo. Ya. Okay, so hay que pararlo, el video. Okay, so you're going to stop the video. You are going to fill in the blanks, and then you can check it with the video. Keep in mind that you have some reflexives, some that are reflexive and non-reflexive, so take a look at the verbs that change meaning when they're used with a reflexive and when they're not used with reflexive. They mean something different. Por ejemplo, acordar and acordarse have completely different meanings. Parecerse and parecer have different meanings as well. Okay? And then when you come back, you can check them. And I will erase that. Now that you're back, Jose y yo a veces nos quejamos de muchas cosas. So Jose and I, sometimes we complain about many things. Now, you have the de there. Quejarse de. Perdona, pero es que yo nunca me acuerdo de tu nombre. Acordarse is to remember. Again, you have the de there. Sometimes that might give things away. Vosotros os parecéis a personas que conozco. Parecerse is to resemble or to look like somebody. Ellos siempre se fijan en los detalles culturales de las películas. So they always fijarse, like pay attention to. Atreverse y acuerda. Okay? Acuerda is to agree. So write down your questions y vamos a repasarlo mañana en clase. Buenas noches.